I've got here the Freewell Mega Pack filters for the Mini 4 Pro. I've had these quite a while, and so far there's only probably been 2 or 3 filters I ever really used, but I wanted to do sort of like a demonstration more for myself, to go through all the filters just to show what the different effects are. I will show a picture on the side here, hopefully, which will show these a little bit better. So across the top row here and the first 2, they're all neutral density filters. So there's an ND16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512 and 1000. Even if you're in the world of photography, those numbers probably don't mean a great deal. Now, what those numbers relate to is the amount of stops of light that get to the camera. The ND16 starts off at 4 stops and they go up 1 stop at a time. So we've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stops of light it will go to. So the ND1000 is quite an extreme dense filter. There's also in here a mist filter, which I've not used before. There's a UV filter, which is what I tend to have on the drone most of the time, because it just gives that little bit of extra protection for the lens, because without that there's nothing covering the lens whatsoever. And there's also a light pollution filter, which is more for doing shots when you've got artificial light about. On the bottom here, these bottom 2 rows, the 6 there are all circular polarizing filters, and it's these again, you've got a straightforward basic circular polarizing filter, which is probably the one I use most of all on the drone. And on top of that, then the rest are all based with neutral density filters as well. So you've got the circular polarizer filter with a neutral density 16, 32, 64, 128 and 256 built in. So again, it gives those extra stops of light. I'm going to go through the neutral density filters. I've already got the drone out ready. Now, I haven't got any filters on there at the minute. It's just as it was when I first bought it. All I've done on here is set up a waypoint file to take the drone off up to about 20 meters high. It just flies off in that direction slightly, goes up to about 30 meters high, and then looking back across this way, I've got some nice oak trees here you'll see in the pictures, and goes up a slight hill, got a few trees on the top there, and hopefully if I catch the light right with the sky and everything, we're going to have a mixture of clouds and blue sky. So I'm recording my screen on my controller, so at least you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I've just basically got the waypoint on here at the minute. Just got the maximum speed of flight time, 12 meters a second. So it gets up and gets over there fairly quickly. The whole point is when it gets to the final stop, which is the second waypoint on there, it will just hover in the direction I've set it for, which will hopefully be where I want to take the picture every time. So if I just hit go on this, continue, aircraft starts up, gets straight in the air, now raising to about 20 meters height. And it's going to go off into the direction where I want it to. So it's now raising also up to 30 meters, and that's basically because I've got a power line running across there as well, just some small telegraph poles running across the countryside. And hopefully you'll be able to see, certainly on the screen, where I've got these 2 or 3 trees in the front here, the slope and the back as well. Now it's quite nice because we've got a reasonable amount of cloud up there, but I do have some blue sky. I've got this in photo mode, as we can see on the screen. I have it in pro mode, as you'll see also on the bottom right hand corner of the screen. And the reason I've done this is that I want to basically try and have the same sort of settings every time and see where the differences are, and then adjust for really the amount of stops of light. So when I put these on auto, and it does increase the ISO slightly, but I'll put it back, switched it off, 100. It's doing a photograph at 1/2500 of a second, so it's very fast. And the white balance has also been set there at 5300K. By switching the auto off and on, it just puts it back on there again. So I can go back there. I'm quite happy the way the photograph is composed. got some trees at the front there, and I've got the break in the top of the back there. So I'm taking a photograph in JPEG and RAW. Take the picture there. I can then just tell the drone to return to home, and it will keep up at the same height, making sure it misses the power lines. Now, because the gimbal is still active with the battery, with the drone powered on, don't want to handle the gimbal while it's powered on, so switch the drone off, which I've got to replace the battery anyway. You can then freely hold the gimbal, and it's just this front cover on here that you just twist slightly like that, and it comes off. And it doesn't show on the camera there, but there's absolutely nothing on there whatsoever, so it's why I usually like to have a filter on there, because it gives some form of protection to the lens. Just plonk that one in an empty space and grab my ND16. And again, I don't know whether it shows on the camera there, but there is. It's almost like a pair of sunglasses. I know that some people hate ND filters being classed as sunglasses. So again, just line up on the drone and it clicks into place. It's just as simple as that. And hopefully you can probably see on the screen now how dark the image already looks. So let's relaunch this to hover back to where it was last time. So now I can see the picture is really, really dark, and I'm going to take a photo of that anyway, because that's what an ND16 looks like. It's 4 stops of light on here. So if I go back into the shutter settings, and at the bottom there it's showing them 3 stops underexposed. So I need to slow the shutter speed on here. So wrong way. So I need to go 1, 2, 3. So what's it, 2,500? So we're getting a bit close now. There you go. That's made a massive difference in speed. So we've gone from 1/2500th of a second to 120th of a second. If I take a photograph of that now, and then we've got the ND16. So I've now gone up to the ND512 filter, and so this is the equivalent of 9 stops of light. You can see what my current settings on there are. I've had to up the ISO to 200, drop down to 1/30th of a second, and that was for 8 stops of light. So let's just send this flying again. It's getting later in the day here as well, so the sun is slowly going down. So do expect these figures to change a little bit. Wait for the drone to get in place. It's almost there. So it's now there in place, and I can see I am slightly overexposed. Don't really want to go much below 1/30th, so if I up to ISO 400 now, there you go, 1/30th of a second, and we're actually perfect exposure there. Take that picture, bring the drone back. So that's now the ND1000 filter on there. So now you can see totally underexposed. We're at ISO 400, 1/30th of a second. It's a little bit gusty, as I say. It's fine for the drone to fly in, but the gusts, if it picks up a little bit of a gust, I mean, you can hear it when it's hovering, that the motors are whizzing in different directions all the time. If it picks up a bit of a motion, the photograph's not going to be very clear. I mean, even at 1/30th of a second, I might be risking some of the quality on these, so I'm going to put that up to ISO 800. We are slightly underexposed, so yeah. Now, drop that down to 1/40th, 1/50th. Look at that, ISO 1600, 1/50th of a second, and that is quite a lot of stops, especially on a bright day like here. So that's the pictures taken. So I'm just going to put this back to auto. Going to see what that then takes. So on fully auto mode, and I'm going to take a picture there. I've downloaded all the pictures now from the drone, and the main reason for that is that one, you can't see the quality properly on the controller, and two, it's hard to get to see all these details for the shutter speed and ISO on the controller as well. This was the first picture that I took, which had no filters on whatsoever, and it's shot at 1/2500th of a second, ISO 100, and it's coming up here as exposure 0, so it should be pretty spot on for the exposure, and it does look quite nice with a good range of greens. We've got the blacks where you can still see detail, and the whites of the clouds. Blue sky would be nice if it was a bit deeper, but that's to be expected with the sun being off onto the right. The next picture here is with the ND16 filter on, and I left all the camera settings exactly the same as if there's no filter on, so you can see how much of a difference having an ND16 on with 4 stops of light difference. And it's showing an exposure compensation here of -3, which is the lowest it can show. It can only show a maximum of plus or -3, so it will always show that for extreme exposure. This was the shot then where I adjusted the exposure settings correctly for the ND16. I took the exposure down. It's showing on here as 1/125th of a second, even though on the drone it shows as 1/120th of a second. Kept the ISO at 100, and I've got to say the image looks probably identical to that without a filter. On the ND32 here, it does look a little bit different to the ND16, and I think the main reason is because the cloud had come over on this one, on this side of the picture, and it just makes it look overall a little bit darker, whereas this one, it's all fully in bright sunshine and it looks a lot brighter. So it just goes to show as well, where the cloud cover is can make a big difference to the image. This was the ND64, down to 1/30th of a second, still kept the same ISO. This was the 128, and it seems to be a lot more sort of covered in cloud now, even though the sky is fairly bright, and I think that's why it just almost looks a little bit underexposed, even though it's exposed correctly. This was the 128, again looks a little bit brighter, seems to have got a lot more blue in the sky as well, and it is showing a slight underexposure on here. This was the ND256, so I think that's something like about 7 or 8 stops of light stop now, down to 1/30th of a second, and I had to up the ISO to 400. This was the ND1000, and the way I can tell that is because I had to put the ISO up to 1600 and did increase the shutter speed slightly to 1/50th of a second. Even though it's showing the exposure on here as being correct, I've got to say the overall picture looks a little bit dark, and it's not, I don't think, because of cloud cover, because you can see the harsh shadows created by the trees here. So I believe that is probably still a little bit underexposed, but the blue sky looks really, really nice. And this was the one where I put it on auto. And it's interesting on here because it had dropped the ISO down to 390, which is a good thing, but the shutter speed was down to 1/15th of a second. And normally with a low shutter speed, especially where it was a little bit breezy, you can often see a little bit of movement in things like the trees, even though that does look fairly stable. Not sure, there could be a little bit of motion blur in there, but you have to look really, really close to see that. The main thing about this though is the one where I went to manual settings for the ISO 1600, and it's really noticeable on this when you look at the sky. Just look how grainy that image is all across there, the blues and even the whites, or sort of like the greys before you get to the pure whites. If you compare this even to the next one where it only put at ISO 390, can zoom in similar sort of distance on here and the whole screen looks a lot clearer. So the best way to this that I think is to compare the whole images all together. This one on the top here was the one with no filters, ND16, ND32 and ND64, and if you look at those images, I don't think there's really any difference in those whatsoever as to regard to anything that's done with colour. In various groups, somebody will show a picture that's heavily overexposed, and it seems that a lot of people on there say you need to get yourself some ND filters, and that's just totally wrong. If ever you get that problem, the problem is not with needing an ND filter. The problem is that you've got your exposure settings wrong. A bit like this one. Put an ND filter on, all of a sudden I've got a dark image. If I'd gone the opposite way round and got the exposure settings say correct, like this one with the ND filter on, took the ND filter off, didn't adjust my exposure settings and still left it on manual mode, I would get the opposite of this, where everything is all burnt out, almost white rather than dark. So an ND filter isn't there to fix those exposure settings. It's there purely and simply, for example on this one where the shutter speed was at 1/2500 of a second, to drop it right down to 1/125th of a second. One place where using an ND filter is really useful, and this is an image I took a while ago at the beginning of the year, and I can't remember what filter I'd put on here, but the shutter speed is 1/8 of a second, still with ISO 100, so we get nice quality, don't get any grainy parts of the image, and it keeps everything sharp. But if you look at the water down here, all of a sudden the water is now a lot sort of fluffier where the motion is, and it's still a fast enough shutter speed so that where you've got the gentle ripples of the waves coming in, they don't go blurry, but it's where there's fast movement that it's made it so it's not really sharp. If I'd got a higher rated neutral density filter on there, I could have possibly dropped the shutter speed a little bit lower and would have got more motion blur in there. So that's where you want to use it for static images like this. A lot of people do use an ND filter when they're dealing with video. If you're interested in seeing more on when you should be using filters and what they really do, if you go into YouTube, and there's a website for Freewell gear, in their playlists they've got a playlist there for why, when and how, and it's under here that you'll then find some good explanations about, especially with the ND filters, when you want to use them and how to use them.